Shawn is 42 years old. He has cerebral palsy, and he's used a wheelchair his entire life. In 12 months, Shawn lost 15 kilograms of body fat. His chronic posture-related pain reduced significantly. His energy rebuilt from the ground up. And he learned to perform bodyweight pull-ups and tricep dips with his wheelchair intact. This video is about how that happened, and it's relevant to far more people than it might initially appear to be, because the principle underneath Shawn's transformation applies to anyone who's ever believed that their body-specific situation puts a ceiling on what's possible for them. I'm Loz Antonenko, health and performance coach, and I work with clients across a very wide spectrum of starting points. Different ages, different health histories, different physical capabilities, different relationships with their own bodies. And Shawn is, in many ways, the case study that I return to most often when I'm talking about what the Mojo method is actually capable of. Not because his results are the largest in numerical terms, but because his starting point most completely challenges the assumption that certain bodies are beyond the reach of meaningful transformation. And that assumption is wrong. I've seen it to be wrong many times. And Shawn's story is the most complete evidence that I actually have. By the end of this video, you are going to understand why the starting point that looks most limiting is often the one that produces the most instructive result, because it forces the precision and specificity that generic programs never require. How chronic pain and excess weight interact in a specific way that creates a cycle, and why breaking that cycle changes everything. And the two-phase approach we used with Shawn that took him from chronic pain and 15 kilos of excess body fat to pull-ups in his wheelchair without either phase being possible without the other. Shawn's situation and what he came with. 3 pillars. Start where you are. The pain-weight function connection, and the two-phase approach from fat loss to strength mastery. Full timeline and results, and what this means for anyone watching. Let's go. When Shawn came to me, the first thing I needed to understand was not his diagnosis. It was his life. Shawn is 42 years old and has lived with cerebral palsy since birth. He uses a wheelchair and has done so for his entire life. His relationship with his body has been shaped across 4 decades by the specific physical reality of cerebral palsy. The muscle tone differences, the postural challenges, and the way his body moves and the way it doesn't. He came to me with a specific practical problem. His posture in his wheelchair, the way he sat, the way his weight was distributed, the position his body settled in across hours and hours of seated use, was actually causing him chronic pain, and that pain had become a daily feature of his life in a way that was significantly affecting his quality of life. Now, he connected the pain correctly to his body weight, and he understood, without being told, that carrying excess weight in a seated position creates specific stresses on the lower back, the hips, and the postural muscles in a way that a standing person doesn't actually experience in quite the same way. Every single kilogram of excess weight that he carried was weight that his seated posture actually had to manage, and the management was causing him pain. So his initial goal was really clear and specific: lose body fat, reduce the postural load, reduce the pain. That was the problem that he brought to me, and that was exactly what he wanted to fix. Now, what happened after that? The progression to strength, the pull-ups, the dips, it wasn't actually in the original brief. It ended up emerging from the momentum that the first phase created, and I think that evolution is one of the most important parts of the story. I want to address something directly because I think it's a question many people watching will actually have. Did working with Shawn require a completely different approach, a specialized disability-specific methodology that bears no resemblance to how we work with other clients? Well, the honest answer is the principles were actually identical, but the application was what was specific. Now, the same framework that produces results for a 50-year-old professional woman or a retired ex-military man produced Shawn's results, right? Protein-first nutrition, handbrake habit identification, progressive, well-designed physical challenge, accountability, and structure. What changed was actually the implementation. The movements, they were selected specifically for Shawn's capabilities. The load parameters were built around his actual physical starting point, not a notional standard. The progression was calibrated to what his body could do and then what it could do next. Now, this is what I mean when I say the Mojo method has no ceiling on who it works with. The ceiling assumption is always about the implementation, never about the principles. And principles, correctly implemented, well, they work. Before any physical training conversation, we started with nutrition. Specifically, we ran a handbrake habit audit, identifying the specific eating patterns that were contributing most to Shawn's excess body fat. And the patterns we found, well, they weren't unusual. They were exactly the same patterns I see in many clients: late night eating, emotional snacking as a response to discomfort or boredom, and a nutritional structure that was basically reactive rather than proactive. What made them super relevant in Shawn's case was the context, right? Chronic pain, it increases the likelihood of emotional eating. The body seeks relief, and for many people, food is the most accessible relief available. And the sedentary reality of full-time wheelchair use meant that the caloric cost of his daily activity was lower than it would be for a person who moves through the world on foot. The same eating patterns that might be neutral for someone else were creating a caloric surplus for Shawn. We address these patterns through the fuck-free flexi food framework, not restriction, not calorie counting as a primary tool, but nutritional structure. Protein at every meal to anchor hunger and support the muscle tissue that we would eventually be using to do pull-ups. A clear eating rhythm, identification of the specific triggers for late night and emotional eating, and deliberate alternatives built around those trigger points. Within the first few weeks, the nutritional structure was holding. Within 3 months, 15 kilograms of body fat had gone. 3 pillars, each one essential, each one building towards what came next. Pillar 1, start where you are. The design philosophy that made a program for Shawn possible when generic programs had really nothing to offer him. Pillar 2, the pain-weight function connection, the mechanism that explains why the fat loss phase was not just cosmetic, but actually clinical. And pillar 3, from fat loss to strength mastery, the 2-phase approach and why phase 2 couldn't have happened without phase 1. The problem with almost all fitness programming, the programs you find online, in apps, in books, in gym inductions, is that they're designed for a standard starting point. A body that moves in standard ways, a set of capabilities that fall within a certain range. When your starting point falls outside that range because of disability, injury, history, chronic conditions, or any other factor that makes you significantly different from the assumed user, these programs don't just underperform, they're often entirely inapplicable. Yeah? They assume movements that you cannot simply do. They assume a baseline of capability that you just don't simply have. They assume a body that responds in ways yours just doesn't. Now, the result for people in Shawn's situation is a history of programs that just couldn't be followed, adaptations that felt like improvisation rather than design, and a really quiet accumulation of evidence for the standard advice that simply doesn't apply to them. That history, it creates its own barrier. The reasonable belief built from direct experience that the results other people get from fitness coaching just aren't available to you specifically. Now, that belief, sure, it's understandable, and for generic programs, it's accurate. The problem isn't the belief, though. It's the assumption that generic programs are all that's available. The approach I used with Shawn started from a single question. What can this specific body do right now in its current state? Not what should it be able to do, not what will it be able to eventually do, what it can do right now, today, that constitutes a genuine physical challenge without exceeding its current capability. Big question, I know. And for Shawn, in the wheelchair, the accessible physical challenges were primarily upper body. The pressing, pulling, the pushing movements that his arms and shoulders could perform. His core, in a specific way that cerebral palsy has shaped his muscle tone and postural patterns was a much more complex area requiring careful, very specific attention. His lower body, given the neurological and muscular characteristics of his cerebral palsy, had a very different role in his training than it would in a program for someone who's ambulatory. Now, none of this made the program any less, though, right? It made it more specific. Every movement was selected because it was appropriate for his body. Every progression was earned by demonstrating capability at the previous level. Nothing was included because it was standard. Everything was included because it was just right for Shawn. And this is what bespoke design actually looks like. Not a modification of a standard program, but a program built from the ground up with Shawn's specific capabilities as the exact starting material. In the early months, before the fat loss had fully progressed and before the strength phase had begun, Shawn's sessions were deliberately modest in their physical demands. The nutritional work was doing the primary heavy lifting in phase 1. The movement work in this period was focused on 2 things. 1, maintaining and building the muscle tissue that would later perform the strength work, and 2, improving the postural endurance that was most directly connected to his actual pain. Supported upper body movements, right? Resisted pushing and pulling exercises calibrated to his current strength. Postural strengthening, specifically targeting the muscles that support his seated position. Breathing and tension work that built core engagement in the specific way his body could actually access. The sessions, they were challenging. They were designed to be, but they were challenging in the right way. They asked something of his body that it hadn't previously been asked at a level it could meet. Not overwhelming though, no, not tokenistic even, appropriate. And alongside the sessions, the nutritional framework, it was holding. The late night eating was reducing the emotional. Snacking triggers were being addressed. The protein structure was supporting the muscle maintenance, and everything else depended on this. By the time we hit the end of month 3, 15 kilograms of body fat had been lost. The chronic postural pain had begun to reduce noticeably, and Shawn's energy, which had been diluted and dulled by the combination of excess weight and chronic pain, was finally beginning to return. Phase 1 was complete, and phase 2 was now possible. I want to explain the specific mechanism connecting Shawn's body weight to his chronic pain because I think understanding it is what makes the fat loss phase feel like something other than a cosmetic goal. When you spend your entire day seated, the physical demands placed on your body are very different from those experienced by someone who moves between sitting and standing throughout the day. In a standing person, the load of body weight is distributed across the entire lower kinetic chain, feet, ankles, knees, hips, spine. Movement continuously ends up redistributing that load. In a seated position, sustained for most of the waking day, that exact same body weight is concentrated primarily into the seated contact points, the ischial tuberosities, the sacrum, the lower lumbar spine, and the musculature that holds the trunk upright specifically. Without the relief of standing and moving, those exact structures, they absorb a continuous concentrated load. Now add excess body weight to that picture. Every kilogram of excess weight that Shawn carried was weight that his seated posture had to manage continuously without the redistribution that movement and position change provided. The postural muscles fatigued way faster. That spinal compression was heaps greater, and the pressure on the seated contact points was far higher. The pain wasn't mysterious. It was the predictable physiological consequence of excess load, concentrated into a specific set of structures sustained across a full waking day. And losing 15 kilograms of body fat did not just change how Shawn looked. No, it changed the mechanical environment of his seated body. Less weight meant less load on those structures, less fatigue, less compression, less pain. The fat loss was the pain treatment. And understanding that made the nutritional discipline of phase 1 feel completely different. Not a cosmetic effort, but a direct investment in his daily quality of life. As Shawn's body weight reduced and his chronic pain began to ease, something happened that I'd anticipated but that Shawn found absolutely surprising. His energy increased substantially. Now, this is a pattern I see consistently in clients managing chronic pain. Pain, it's exhausting, not in a metaphorical sense, but in a literal physiological sense. Managing chronic pain consumes significant neural and metabolic resources. The body is constantly processing discomfort, making micro adjustments to try and reduce it, holding tension against it. And that processing has a metabolic cost that manifests as fatigue. When the pain is reduced, as Shawn's did progressively and measurably as the weight came off, the resources that had been allocated to managing it were actually just freed up. His energy increased, his motivation increased with it, and his appetite for the next phase of the work also increased. Now, this is the cascade. Pain reduction enables energy increase. Energy increase enables appetite for physical challenge, and physical challenge, specifically the strength training of phase 2, further improves body composition and function, and better body composition further reduces the postural load. Further load reduction, well, guess what? Further reduces pain, and every element supports every other element. The system, once moving in the right direction, it accelerates itself with its own momentum. And phase 1, it started the cascade. Phase 2 was what the cascade made possible. Now, the pull-ups and dips weren't in Shawn's original brief. Let me just tell you where they came from, though. When the 15 kilograms were gone, when the pain had reduced, when the energy was back, Shawn found himself in a position he hadn't actually been in before in his entire adult life, which was feeling physically capable and wanting more of it, obviously. Now, he'd started the process wanting to feel less pain. What he discovered as the pain reduced and the energy returned was that he wanted strength, actually. He wanted to be able to do something physically remarkable. Not for anyone else's benefit, though, but for his own. And he asked me what was possible, and so I gave him an honest answer. Well, I don't know exactly what's possible, but I do know that we can find out. So let's design phase 2 and see. Now, the target he set, which is pull-ups and dips with a wheelchair, was pretty specific, and from the outside, pretty unconventional. The wheelchair was part of it on purpose, and he wasn't trying to perform these movements despite the wheelchair. He was going to perform them with it, as it was, literally as part of who he was. Now, that framing is very important, and it's what shaped the design of phase 2. So pull-ups and tricep dips, particularly with the additional load of a wheelchair, requires a specific and significant upper body strength base. The primary muscles involved are the latissimus dorsi, or the lats, the biceps, and the muscles of the posterior shoulder for pull-ups, the triceps, the anterior deltoids, and the pectoral muscles for dips. Performing these movements with a wheelchair adds meaningful resistance way beyond body weight. Now, the phase 2 program built toward these movements systematically over approximately 6 to 9 months of progressive strength work. And so we started with assisted and banded versions of the pulling and pushing movements, reducing the load to a level where Shawn could complete the movement with control, importantly, and full range, and then we progressed the load incrementally as his strength developed. Now, the progression, it wasn't linear. There were weeks where the load held steady to allow consolidation, and there were weeks where it jumped more than expected and his body responded strongly to a particular stimulus. We tracked everything, though. Every session's output informed the next one. Alongside the primary movement work, we maintained the postural strengthening from phase 1 because the same postural muscles that had been strengthened to reduce his pain were now the contributors to stability and the stability he needed for the strength movements. And phase 1 hadn't just solved a problem, it had actually really built a foundation. After approximately 9 months of phase 2 work, 12 months total from the start, Shawn performed bodyweight pull-ups and tricep dips with his wheelchair intact. Not a modified version, not a simulation. I'm talking pull-ups and dips from a wheelchair because the work was right and the time was sufficient. Now, I want to be direct about why I think Shawn's story matters to people who don't share his specific circumstances, because I think it'd be easy to watch this video and feel inspired by it while believing it belongs to a separate category of experiences from your own. Shawn's starting point was a body that almost every generic fitness program would have considered unworkable, yeah? The assumed movements, they were unavailable to him. The assumed baseline of capability, it didn't apply. The assumption that transformation was available to him in a meaningful rather than tokenistic sense wasn't one that most coaches have made with confidence. Yet, the transformation was extraordinary. And that tells me, and I want to tell you, is that the ceiling that you've placed on what's possible for your body is almost certainly lower than the real ceiling, yeah? The real ceiling is determined by your biology, your consistency, the quality of your program, and the time you give it. Now, it's not determined by your history of attempts that didn't work, or by your current starting point, or by the story you or anyone else has told you about what your body can and cannot do. Shawn's body rewrote a story it had been living inside for 42 long years. Whatever story your body is living inside, it's also rewritable. Let me give you the full 12-month picture. Months 1 through to 3. Phase 1, fat loss. Nutritional framework installed. Handbrake habits identified and addressed, specifically late night eating and emotional snacking. Fuck-free flexi-food framework applied with protein as the anchor. Movement work focused on postural strengthening and muscle maintenance. 15 kilograms of body fat lost. Chronic postural pain begins to reduce measurably. Energy starts to return. Months 4 through 6. Transition and foundation building. Pain is significantly reduced. Energy is substantially higher. The appetite for physical challenge has started to develop. Phase 2 planning begins. Strength foundations are built, assisted pulling and pushing patterns, progressive overload introduced. The nutritional framework from phase 1 is maintained. Shawn's identity as someone who trains is solidifying. Months 7 through to 10. Phase 2, strength development, progressive loading on push and pull patterns, resistance increasing as strength develops, postural strength maintained alongside the primary strength work. The wheelchair is integrated into the training approach. Movements that will eventually be performed with it are developed with the wheelchair present from the beginning, so the final performance is just an extension of the training rather than a one-off test. Months 11 and 12, consolidation and achievement. Shawn performs bodyweight pull-ups and tricep dips with his wheelchair. Weight is maintained. The loss from phase 1 holds. Pain is a fraction of what it was at the start. Awareness of food and its effects has become intrinsic. Motivation is self-sustaining. The transformation is complete and also embedded. If you have a physical disability, a complex medical history, or any other factor that has led you to believe that significant physical transformation isn't available to you, here's where to start. First, get specific about the problem you most want to solve. Not a generic goal, I mean a specific problem. For Shawn, it was posture-related pain. What's yours? Pain, fatigue, a specific movement that you want to be able to perform? Getting specific is what makes a program designable. Second, understand that the principles, protein-first nutrition, habit identification, progressive physical challenge, they apply to your body in the same way they apply to every other body. The implementation is what's different. The principles aren't. And third, find a coach who'll start from your actual starting point, not from a standard program modified for you, from you. If the program you're being offered doesn't account for your specific capabilities from the first session, it's the wrong program. And if you've been told by anyone, for any reason, that your body is beyond the reach of meaningful transformation, Shawn's story is the direct answer to that. Pull-ups with a wheelchair, 12 months from chronic pain, and 15 kilos of excess body fat. Gone. Let me give you the complete picture. In 12 months, body fat, 15 kilos lost in a sustainable, non-restrictive way, maintained at the 12-month mark. Chronic postural pain, significantly reduced from a daily quality of life affecting feature to a manageable background presence. Energy rebuilt from depleted to absolutely high. The cascade of pain reduction enabling energy restoration was complete. Upper body strength progressed from a low base to the level required to perform bodyweight pull-ups and tricep dips with a wheelchair. Nutritional awareness deeply embedded. Shawn's relationship with food shifted from reactive to deliberate and held at the 12-month mark. Mindset, from this might not work for someone like me to I do pull-ups in my wheelchair. That sentence alone, honestly, it tells you everything about the identity shift. 15 kilograms, chronic pain reduced, pull-ups with a wheelchair, 1 year. Starting from a point that most programs would have considered the end of the road. It wasn't the end of the road. It was actually the starting point. 3 pillars, 1 extraordinary transformation. Pillar 1, start where you are. Build a program from the specific capabilities of the actual body in front of you, not from a standard template that assumes a body you don't have. The starting point is the material. Build from it, not despite it. Pillar 2, the pain-weight function connection. Excess body weight in a seated body creates specific, predictable, addressable pain. Addressing the weight addresses the pain. Addressing the pain releases the energy. Released energy enables the next phase. The cascade runs in one direction, but it has to be started. And pillar 3, from fat loss to strength mastery. Phase 1 makes phase 2 possible. Phase 2 makes the result extraordinary. Neither phase alone is the story, but the two together in sequence are what produce pull-ups in a wheelchair. If you take one thing from Shawn's story, the ceiling on what is possible for your body is not where you think it is. It's not determined by your diagnosis, your history, your starting point, or anyone's assessment of what someone like you can achieve. It's determined, though, by the quality of the program, the appropriateness of the approach, and the consistency you bring to it over time. All three of those are within your influence. And Shawn bought all three. The results speak for itself. If you have a physical disability, a complex health history, or any other reason you've believed that the results other people get from coaching aren't available to you, take the Fix Your Mojo quiz. 2 minutes! Honestly, it identifies exactly what's getting in the way of your results in your specific situation, not a generic assessment, specific to where you are and what you're actually working with. Now, the quiz is in the description below, and remember, it takes 2 minutes and the results are immediate. And if you know someone with any kind of physical limitation, any complex starting point, any history of being told that transformation isn't for them, please share this video with them. Shawn's story is the evidence that the belief deserves to be challenged. Please give them the chance to challenge it. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.